controlled by the British, and Prabhupada went to the college, Scots College there. He learned English, of course, as a child. He was very proficient with English. His father was a great devotee and trained him how to worship the Lord. And then he met his spiritual master there in Calcutta in 1922. It was a momentous, you could say, encounter. The very first moment, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his spiritual master, exhorted him, encouraged him to go with the message of Lord Chaitanya in the English-speaking countries. He said, "You are educated young boys. You should bring this most sublime message into the English-speaking countries." That was 1922. So Prabhupada was a married man. Then he was busy with earning for supporting his family. So it wasn't until 1959 he took sannyas. That means sannyasi severed his connection with his family. They were grown up, and he was living in Vrindavan by himself. Then he started a little preaching there in Jhansi, and he was always thinking about the order of his spiritual master, how to bring this message into the West. And he was thinking London or New York, but he considered New York as a more important city. By this time, in the early 60s, so he's making plans. He was trying to get a visa that he could go, but he had to be sponsored. So a sponsor letter came by intervention of the Lord, and he was able to get the no objection certificate to come to America. But he had no money, so he begged a ticket on a steamship from Scindia. So then she allowed him to come on her ship, which was leaving from Calcutta. It left in the early part of 65, or maybe springtime, 1965. So Prabhupada was on that Jaladut, that was called the name of the ship, and he came to America. But on the way, he suffered a stroke, heart attack. And you can read his diary is there. He was keeping a diary. He said, struggle for life and death is going on. Somehow Krishna helped him. He even had a dream at that time. He told us that in the dream he was like struggling to come on the boat, and Krishna came, and he was rowing the boat. It was a smaller boat. Krishna he said, "Don't worry, Avi." That was his Abhaya Charanaravinda was his initiated name. So he told him, "Don't worry, I'll help you get there." So Prabhupada somehow landed in first port of was in Boston, and he got off the boat there. And he saw, and he wrote a wonderful poem. He said, "I don't know why, Krishna, you sent me to this place, which is so full of passion and ignorance, but you must have some purpose. Otherwise, why have you arranged everything like this for me to come? But I don't think I have the power to convince anybody here. These people are so passionate. But there must be some reason you brought me here, so if you want, I'll just be your puppet and you make me dance, like the puppet master." So Prabhupada wrote that poem. He said, "Make me dance, make me dance, make me dance." And he signed it, "Your insignificant servant." So Prabhupada then landed. He had no money, few books. He got first he went to Butler, Pennsylvania, where the invitation was. Then he came to New York, and he didn't have enough money, so he was just struggling for one whole year in New York until he finally, some young boys came forward to assist him and they found this society, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which founded in New York City in 1966 in the summer. Prabhupada landed in September of 65, so it took almost a year for him to get organized a society. And then from there, they got a storefront at the Lower East Side, 26th Second Avenue. That was the first temple. I met Prabhupada there at that storefront. It was a couple years later. But it was just a small facility, not a very good neighborhood. Prabhupada had his quarters in the back, upstairs. I first saw Prabhupada there. And he was encouraging us in the very beginning. Just like he was encouraged by his spiritual master, so he was encouraging us. Preach this message of Lord Chaitanya. You're Americans, you have everything, so go, give. Instead of taking something, give something. That was Prabhupada's rule. He was always extending himself. He was always ready to give his time. He wasn't at all exclusive or something. Anybody, especially in those early days, anybody could come in and talk to him. He would spend time with us and encourage us, and this way he began this movement, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So now we have like 400 centers all over the world, and he is being honored in every one of those centers today as the founder Acharya. Acharya means one who teaches by example. So that was his move of teaching. He would show by example, not just dictate to us, do this, do this. But he was practically showing that how a pure devotee lives, and how a pure devotee is always joyful. This was something you couldn't pretend. Prabhupada was always ecstatic in his own way. He was very serious, but you could see that he was connected with Krishna, and therefore there was no anxiety. Everything was turned over to Krishna. It was Krishna's work he was doing, and Krishna would arrange for the results. He wasn't at all in anxiety, but he was never lazy, always pushing, even staying up in the middle of the night, translating his books, didn't care for his own discomfort, living in a very meager place. That little apartment that I saw Prabhupada in, they didn't even have a proper desk. He was using an aluminum trunk as a desk and writing. But of course, gradually the movement became more opulent. Money and men came. But Prabhupada was never attached. Even in 1977, the same year that he left his body, he came to Bhubaneswar, and they didn't have any facilities. They just had a little cottage, a grass cottage out in the field. The land was there. So the devotee said, Prabhupada, you can stay at an apartment a few miles away. We can arrange. But Prabhupada said, no, this is fine. I'm happy here. So they didn't even have running water. He had to pass through in the fields. He was, advanced age, had a big movement all over the world, but he was living very simply. He stayed there for a week or 10 days. Just simple living. He wasn't attached at all to any opulence. The only thing he was very strict about was that nobody minimized his spiritual master or Krishna. I personally saw him become upset when people misinterpret Bhagavad Gita. He was literally upset that they changed. He said, why don't they write their own book of philosophy? Why they spoil Bhagavad Gita by adding and subtracting and so on. So he was very loyal to his spiritual master Krishna, and we should follow in his footsteps. Not that we can be him or expect to accomplish what he's accomplished, but we should be loyal to him, his method of preaching and his management and so on, his management body. And we should also be loyal to Krishna, not allow Krishna to be minimized in any way. Nor should we allow Prabhupada to be minimized. Our faith is that Prabhupada is especially empowered to do this work. So others may have Guru, Gaudiya Math, we wish them well. But our loyalty is here. We don't want to hear anybody who's going to minimize Prabhupada. This is our conviction. Just like he didn't There's one story where one of his disciples got reinitiated by somebody else and came to Prabhupada, and in that exchange, he somehow minimized Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And after he left, Prabhupada told the secretary, don't let him see me anymore. And usually Prabhupada was very open. Like I said, anybody could approach him. But he told the secretary, don't let this person come to have my darshan again. Because there was some minimization of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. So in the same way, we shouldn't tolerate. We can tolerate so much on our own account, but we should always appreciate that Prabhupada is the one who saved us. He came to this Western country. None of us would have had any information about Krishna or Bhagavad Gita except for his endeavor, his ardent endeavor and strenuous endeavor. As I mentioned, heart attack, so many difficulties he had to face, neophyte disciples who didn't know how to treat him properly, but he tolerated everything for the pleasure of the spiritual master Krishna. Therefore, we should follow in his footsteps and also become pure devotees, and we can become pure devotees by following him. That's the process. If we get Prabhupada's mercy, if Prabhupada is pleased with us, then naturally Krishna will be pleased with us. And if Krishna is pleased with us, then we can enter into the spiritual world. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Please accept my humble obeisances, Srila Prabhupada. All glories to you, the Savior of the world. It's by Krishna's causeless mercy that we have met your divine grace. Causeless because we really have no qualifications. Life after life we've engaged in sense gratification, caring nothing about spiritual life. But somehow Krishna has felt compassion on us and given us your wonderful association. How fortunate we are. Srila Prabhupada, you've given us the spiritual world, a world full of nectar and bliss, a world free from birth, death, old age, and disease. You've given us so many things, Srila Prabhupada. You've given us Krishna Prasadam, spiritual food that's been offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You've given us a life of wonderful festivals, such as Janmashtami, Ratha Yatra, and so many others. And you've given us the association of so many wonderful devotees who are dedicated to serving and pleasing you. Srila Prabhupada, you've undoubtedly performed miracles. In fact, once you said, when someone asked about the devotees, if you could perform miracles, you said, yes, these devotees are my miracles. So when you think of that, so many of us came from such degraded lives and had no qualifications whatsoever, but somehow you turned us into dancing peacocks. You made us become serious about spiritual life, whereas before we were just only serious about sense gratification. So in that regard, Prabhupada, you definitely have performed miracles. And when I see the wonderful service that your disciples and followers are doing all over the world, it is actually absolutely astounding. Just recently there's been huge Ratha Yatras in New York, Los Angeles, and so many temples all over the world. And really there's nothing like that in the world. Granted, the materialists, they have their parades, they have their festivals, but those festivals and parades are all based on sense gratification. Whereas what Prabhupada has given us, these wonderful festivals like Ratha Yatra, the focus is Lord Krishna. So everyone derives benefit by attending that festival, whether it be just by seeing the Lord on his cart, whether by pulling the cart, whether by chanting Hare Krishna, whether taking some prasadam that one gets from the devotees. He derives lasting eternal benefit. So in that regard, Prabhupada, you've given the world everything. Unfortunately, not everyone is following what you're giving. But since we've come in contact with you, Srila Prabhupada, our desire has to be to please you and follow exactly what you've given us. I can only ask Srila Prabhupada, if it's your desire, to please give me the strength and determination so that I can become a worthy disciple and servant of yours. Otherwise, there's really no meaning to life. The goal of life is to surrender to Krishna. And it's only by your grace, Srila Prabhupada, that we can do that. So I beg you to please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to you, Srila Prabhupada, your fallen servant, Dharmatma Das. Hare Krishna.